Welcome to Gardening Coast to Coast. I'm on the East Coast, Kim is on the West Coast. Today we are going to talk about cucumbers, getting them in the ground. She's harvesting. I'm going to show you really how to get them started here in my zone. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's part of our Facebook group, Gardening Coast to Coast. We really hope that turns into a gardening community. A community where we can share what we do, help each other out, show off what we're doing, because that's a lot of fun too, but mostly really create a place that's safe for us to become better gardeners. Now, in Maryland Zone 7, I'm a little bit behind. You can get these plants in earlier, but I seed start my warm weather crops. I've got cucumbers in here, I have melons in here, and the reason that I start them in cups is because I still have my cool weather crops in the garden. Well, most of them. I've been pulling out a lot. I've got a lot of these into the ground. So as my cool weather crops are maturing, when I don't have space, I'd like to start them in these styrofoam cups just like this. You don't have to use styrofoam cups, of course, if you don't want to use plastic cups or any kind of container. But you want about 8 to 10 ounces of space in here for the growing medium. You can use basic potting mix, you can use garden soil, anything's really going to work for your cucumbers, your melons, your squash, and your zucchini. Let's see if I can find a cucumber. Okay, this is the lemon cucumber. Now this has been in here for about 5 weeks. You only want to hold your plants in these kind of cups for 2 to 4 weeks. 2 weeks is a little bit early to get them into the ground, but you can do it. And you really don't want to go past 4 weeks, because what will happen is into the 5th and the 6th week, this plant will start producing flowers. It's going to be sort of like a bonsai plant. It's going to be miniature. It's going to start doing what it wants to do without having the size. So hold them in here 2 to 4 weeks, get them into the ground. And this one is a little bit late going out, and you can see the roots are starting to circle, but with 8 to 10 ounces of space in here, that's plenty to hold this cucumber for growing and then get it into your ground. So I'm going to show you, I'm using a leaf grow mix, that's my soil amendment. I'm going to show you how to set up the soil for your cucumber plants. I'll talk a little bit about trellising too, and we'll get you started here on the East Coast. And Kim is going to cover harvesting, maybe talk a little bit about yeah, the heat, watering, fertilizing, and some disease management. So before I get to showing you how to set up the planting hole, let me just show you some of the things I already got. And these went in maybe 7 or 10 days ago. That's a market more in front, 2 cucumbers there, national pickling in the back, 2 cucumbers there, and they're going to grow up this trellis. And you definitely want to give vertical trellising a try because it will save you space. That's another national pickling that's going to trellis right up that chicken wire, and that again went in about 10 days ago, and it's the same size as the plants that were in the cups that I just showed you. And because they're in the ground, because the roots can grow much more larger, the plant is starting to take off. This was kohlrabi as of yesterday, so I'm pulling this all out, and I will be putting in some beans and cucumbers into this space. So this is the basic setup I use for planting cucumbers, melons, squash, zucchini. Those plants are heavy feeders, they grow fast, so you really want to put in a good amount of organic matter. Hopefully if you have compost you can certainly use that. I'm going to be using leaf grow. But you also want compost in there because you really want this gardening hole to hold water. You don't want these plants to run out of moisture. To set it up, 10 to 12 inches across, maybe 8 to 10 inches deep, and then 2 tablespoons of an organic granular fertilizer down in there. Try and stay around a 5-5-5. This happens to be actually I think a 6-4-6. And the reason I say that is because over time I've learned we just tend to over fertilize our plants. Mix in the 2 tablespoons well into the bottom. When the roots get down there, it'll be available to them. Also, your squash, your zucchinis, even cucumbers, sometimes sort of can get blossom end rot. If you think you have a calcium issue, you can drop in some gypsum. That won't change the pH of your soil, but it will add calcium. Or you can go ahead and use some garden lime. I don't mind using the garden lime. Just maybe a tablespoon, because I use a lot of peat moss, which is acidic. And again, just mix it all into there. So this is just getting the bottom of the hole set up. Now, if you have your own compost, that would be great, or you can get it from a local source. This is organic compost. It's leaf grow. It's made at my local county. And just mix it in well to your garden soil. This will hold moisture. It will provide some nutrients. And I say some nutrients because I'm not sure sometimes how well the bagged compost products are really broken down and creating nutrients for your plants. But if this is your own compost, this is perfect, and you don't really need to add any more organic fertilizer. At this point, about another tablespoon or 2 in there. and then mix in the rest of your soil. And you can see my soil has a lot of clay in it. So you really want to get that organic matter in there and just mix it through. Break everything up nice and loose. Great water retention. Nutrient value. And the space for your cucumber is set up nicely. Now, if you weren't going to use a transplant like this, you would go ahead and just drop 2 seeds right into the mound, about 1 inch deep, covered over, and then depending on the variety, you may thin to one plant or you may leave both in there. But again, I'm using the transplant. This is really, I think, 5 weeks old. You want to get it into the ground within 4 weeks. I really want to stress that. Get the hole set up. You're going to plant to a depth just above here. If the bottom is a little coiled, gently break it up. And now I have a 4 or 5 week old transplant in there ready to go. Just water it in. You've got the organic matter in there, you have your nutrients in there, calcium if needed, and then every 10 to 14 days just water this with your choice of water-soluble fertilizer. And let's go see what else I have growing in the garden. Now these are my lemon cucumbers. I have 2 of them in here. This is a sunken container and the bottoms are cut out so that the root systems will go into the ground. And it's sort of like a mini raised bed where I concentrate all the good materials right in this container. Now I have 2 lemon cucumbers in here because they don't set a lot of female flowers. And even though I have a nice trellising system set up with these 8-foot posts, they're tied off at the top like a teepee. And I'll put some string around here. 2 plants are really going to compete in this space. But because they don't produce a lot of cucumbers, I decided to keep 2 in here. I want more female flowers, this way I'll get more cucumbers. And you can decide on how many plants you put in this space based on the variety of the plant. I also wanted to show you some side dressing. This isn't big enough yet, but when it gets to about this height, I will side dress it. About 1 to 2 tablespoons of your organic fertilizer. Just sprinkle it around the outside, keep it a couple inches away from the stem, and then just work it in about 1 inch into the surface. And when you water it in, that fertilizer will, wash down to the roots. And it's a great way to really boost your plants because cucumbers are heavy, heavy, heavy feeders. And again, I want to thank you guys so much for being part of our Facebook group. Now here's Kim with the harvest. She is way ahead of me and she's pulling cucumbers out of her garden now.
Well, Gary is just getting his cucumbers going there on the East Coast in Maryland. Here on the West Coast in Southern California, I've actually had some cucumbers in the ground since the beginning of April. Been harvesting them for about a month, and today I'm going to share with you some trellising tips, some tips for protecting your cucumbers from the heat, as well as watering, fertilizing, and then always a fun thing, I've got some that are ready to harvest. Well, it is cooking here right now in Southern California. Today it's supposed to be close to 100 degrees. Now, cucumbers do like a little bit of afternoon shade. So if you can plant them in a spot like that in your garden, great. They do tend to get a little bit bitter in the heat. So what I've done here actually is set up a little shade tent. This is a shade cloth I got on Amazon. It blocks out about 40% of the sun's rays, so they still are getting sun under here. Now in the morning I'll leave this up, and that way the sun's not quite so bright, but in the afternoon, when it's really hot, I'll fold this down, and this does help protect them from the heat, keeps them producing. You won't see as much blossom drop that way, and it just keeps your cucumbers going even during the heat. Now, especially during the heat, and while your cucumbers are flowering and fruiting, it's really important to keep them well watered and well fertilized. Otherwise, they won't keep producing for you, and oftentimes the fruit will be bitter. So I like to give them a liquid fertilizer. I use Vermistera worm tea every couple of weeks and check them daily for water, especially when the temperatures are over 90 degrees. So I like to water at the base of the plants, either with my drip irrigation system, with my watering can, or my nozzle, and I give them a dose of worm tea every couple of weeks. Now water at the base to keep the leaves dry. That way you avoid powdery mildew. If you're not familiar with powdery mildew, it's very common to cucumbers. It's a fungal disease, and it happens when the leaves of your plants get wet and don't dry off, so it's very common after rain or if you live in an area of high humidity. But even in a very dry climate like I live in, we usually get it at some point during the summer, usually at the end of the growing season. But basically it just looks like Someone dumped a bottle of baby powder all over your leaves. Usually affects the bottoms and the tops of the leaves. Now, I don't have powdery mildew right now, but prevention is always the best cure, so I'm going to spray today in hopes that I stave off that powdery mildew till much later in the growing season. You can use some foliar sprays, really work well. I'm using worm tea today, but the worm tea I really like because it has a lot of beneficial bacteria and microbes that really put a protective coating over the leaves and help crowd out the pests and disease. So I'm going to spray the tops of the leaves and the bottoms of the leaves. And I like to do this in the morning. That way the leaves have plenty of time to dry throughout the day. And I like to spray my plants with this about once a week. Cucumbers are a vining plant and they grow very nicely on a trellis. I prefer to grow it that way because it keeps them off the ground, it keeps the plants healthier, and it also looks really pretty in the garden. So a couple different ways that you can do it. You can take your pick, whatever works best for you. This is one of my DIY tomato cages, and I've actually made it just a little bit smaller in diameter. But the cucumber is just growing up very nicely on the inside, and this is really easy because I don't have to do any tying up or anything like that, and it also looks very nice as well. I did add an extra pole in the back here just for stability. And then next to it, I have a cucumber on a store-bought tomato cage, which isn't tall enough. So I stuck a couple of poles in here and stakes, and the cucumber is climbing up. And you can see I'm tying it here with a little stretchy tie tape. You can also just put a stake in the ground and tie your cucumber up the pole as it grows. Here's another very simple trellis that you can use for your cucumbers. It's a teepee trellis. So basically it's just 3 bamboo poles and formed in a teepee shape, secured at the top with some wire. And I just planted 3 brand new transplants that I started from seed, just moved them outdoors. They're gonna climb up the poles very nicely, fill this area in, and continue to give me a harvest all season long. So this actually brings up another point. I've got my first crop already going. They've been in the ground for a couple of months, already producing. When those plants stop producing or die out, these plants will be ready to go, and I'll continue to get a harvest all season long. So definitely succession plant your cucumbers, which just means you spread the plantings out over time, every couple of weeks or every month. That way you get a harvest well into the fall. Now for one of my favorite parts of gardening, harvesting. It's so much fun to come out to your own backyard and pick some food that you grew yourself. And I love cucumbers. They're an absolutely fresh, delicious, very cool summer snack. And I've got some that are ready to harvest right now. Once your cucumbers start producing, you want to check them daily because they do like to hide underneath the foliage. And if you miss a day, pretty soon you're going to end up with a giant cucumber that's bitter and not really that good for eating. So this one is absolutely the perfect size. It's going to be nice and tender. And you don't want to pull the cucumber off the plant. You really want to go in with a pair of scissors or this little pair of pruners here and just clip it right at the stem. And wow, that is a really nice looking cucumber. Here's another really nice one. Oh wow, look at this one. This one is huge. This might be a little bit oversized. I missed this one down in here. But that brings up a good point. If your cucumbers are oversized and they taste a little bit bitter, no worries. Usually the bitterness is concentrated at the ends. So just cut off the ends, and usually the portion in the middle will be nice and sweet and refreshing and perfectly good for eating. This one's hiding just a little bit. Well, I just picked 4 absolutely beautiful looking cucumbers, and I also found some yellow beans hiding back in there, which is a lot of fun too. It's getting hot out here. I'm going to head inside, make some cool cucumber salad and cool off a little bit. But before I do, I hope you're enjoying these Gardening Coast to Coast videos. Make sure you check out the Facebook group. It's a lot of fun, lots of interaction going on over there from gardeners all over the world. What's unique about this group is that each post is tagged by gardening zone so that you can find gardening tips specific to your location. Comment below, let us know if you're growing cucumbers, any tips you might have. We'd love to hear about it. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next video.